I've often found myself at the precipice of sleep, caught between the world of dreams and the harsh reality of my waking life, pondering over the decisions that led me here. My name is lost to the pages of classified documents and redacted reports, but my contribution to what was once heralded as the last great hope for peace remains indelibly marked on the fabric of history. I was a scientist, one of many tasked with unlocking the secrets of the atom, under the guise of ending the war and saving lives. But as the project neared its culmination, I found myself wrestling with a moral quandary that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. It was in the quiet, early hours of the morning, when the world around me lay in silence, that I would reflect on my work. The Manhattan Project, as it was covertly known, was the pinnacle of human ingenuity and, perhaps, folly. We were a collective of the brightest minds, drawn together by a shared mission that was as noble in intention as it was devastating in execution. Yet, as the boundaries of science were pushed further than ever before, I couldn't help but feel a deep, unsettling foreboding about the force we were about to unleash upon the world. My role in this grand endeavor was not one of leadership nor of fame. I was a cog in a vast machine, albeit one acutely aware of the machine's purpose. The secrecy that shrouded our work added a layer of isolation, not just from the outside world, but from our own conscience. Discussions about ethics and morality were luxuries we could ill afford, or so we were told. But in the silence of those early hours, my conscience spoke loud and clear, voicing the fears and doubts that I dared not share with my colleagues. The dreams began as whispers, visions of destruction so vast and so complete that they shook me to my core. I saw cities engulfed in flames, shadows etched into walls, and the faces of those who would become the silent testament to our work's true legacy. These were not the dreams of a man at peace with his actions, but the premonitions of what was to come. As I pen these words, I am not seeking absolution nor forgiveness. I write to bear witness to the cost of our ambition, to the shadows that stretched over tomorrow in the wake of our creation. This is my story, the tale of a man who stood at the threshold of a new era, torn between his duty to his country and the moral implications of his work. It is a story of hope, despair, and the relentless pursuit of a peace that came at an unimaginable price. In the dim glow of my study, surrounded by books that once held the promise of unlocking the universe's secrets, I find myself reflecting on the journey that led me here. It's a story that begins not with the grandeur of discovery, but with the humble curiosity of a boy fascinated by the stars above and the invisible forces that govern our world. As a child, I was captivated by the mysteries of the cosmos and the intricate dance of particles too small to see. My parents, though not scientists themselves, nurtured this curiosity. They gifted me a small telescope on my 10th birthday, a window to the heavens that only deepened my fascination. Night after night, I would gaze at the moon's craters and the shimmering bands of the Milky Way, dreaming of unraveling the universe's secrets. My passion for physics took a more defined shape in high school, where I met Mr. Alden, a physics teacher whose enthusiasm for the subject was infectious. He introduced me to the wonders of electromagnetism and quantum mechanics, fields that promised to unlock new understandings of the world. Under his guidance, I devoured books and articles on the latest scientific discoveries, each one feeding my voracious appetite for knowledge. It was during my undergraduate years at college, immersed in advanced studies of particle physics, that the path of my life took an unexpected turn. The world was at war, and science, it seemed, was being conscripted into the effort. I heard whispers of a secret project, one that sought to harness the fundamental power of the atom itself. The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. My recruitment into the Manhattan Project came as a letter, unassuming yet heavy with implication. I was invited to join a team of the nation's most brilliant minds, working in secrecy to develop a new weapon of unprecedented power. The letter spoke of duty and the need for scientific prowess to end the war and save lives. Yet, it was silent on the moral dimensions of such a weapon. I accepted, driven by a blend of patriotic fervor and scientific curiosity. What greater challenge could there be for a physicist than to unlock the energy of the atom? I rationalized the decision by the immediate context of the war, but deep down, I was intoxicated by the scientific frontier we were about to breach. Arriving at Los Alamos, I was struck by the surreality of it all. Here, in this secluded city of scientists, we were to undertake work that could alter the course of human history. I was both honored and overwhelmed to be counted among such luminaries as Oppenheimer, who seemed to embody the dual nature of our task: the pursuit of knowledge and the specter of its application. As I settled into the rhythm of our secret community, I found my thoughts increasingly haunted by the implications of our work. The excitement of scientific discovery was tinged with a growing awareness of the destructive power we were poised to unleash. Yet, in those early days, I clung to the belief that our work was necessary, that the end would justify the means. Little did I know how profoundly the shadows of tomorrow would weigh upon me, casting long, dark fingers into the depths of my conscience. The journey from a boy mesmerized by the stars to a man entangled in the most devastating project of the atomic age was only just beginning. The letter from the Manhattan Project arrived on a crisp autumn morning, its contents both an invitation and a challenge that spoke directly to the heart of my scientific curiosity and burgeoning sense of duty. As I broke the seal and read through the carefully worded invitation, a surge of excitement washed over me. Here was an opportunity to contribute to something monumental, a project that could potentially bring an end to the global conflict that had engulfed the world in flames and darkness. The thought of being at the forefront of a scientific endeavor with such profound implications was exhilarating. With each word, my pulse quickened, not just at the prospect of exploring uncharted scientific territories, but also at the chance to serve my country in a manner most unique. It was a convergence of my deepest passion for physics and a burgeoning sense of patriotism that had grown more profound as the war's atrocities became increasingly evident. I was about to engage in an effort that stood at the intersection of theoretical physics and practical application, a realm where my work could contribute directly to ending the war and restoring peace. The drive to Los Alamos was a journey of introspection. As the miles passed, I reflected on the gravity of my decision. I was leaving behind the conventional path of a physicist for uncharted territory, propelled by a mix of idealism and the ambition to be part of a historic scientific venture. The landscape around me seemed a metaphor for the venture I was about to embark upon, vast, unexplored, and filled with potential for both great discovery and profound reflection. Arriving at the secret city of Los Alamos, I was greeted by a scene that was at once thrilling and daunting. The bustling activity and the palpable sense of urgency underscored the importance of our mission. Meeting other scientists, many of whom I had only read about in journals, was an awe-inspiring experience. These were individuals whose work I had admired, and now I was to be their colleague, contributing to an effort that dwarfed any previous scientific undertaking. As I settled into the routine of project work, my initial excitement was complemented by a deepening sense of patriotic duty. Each experiment, each calculation, took on added significance as part of a collective endeavor aimed at bringing an end to years of global suffering. It was a time of intense focus and dedication, where the boundaries between day and night blurred, and the lab became the center of my universe. Despite the secrecy that shrouded our work, there was a camaraderie among the project members, a shared understanding that we were part of something much larger than ourselves. This was not just about scientific curiosity, it was a matter of national security, a direct contribution to the war effort that transcended traditional roles of soldiers and civilians. In those moments of breakthrough and frustration alike, I felt an unwavering commitment to our cause, buoyed by the belief that our work was essential for the greater good. Reflecting on those early days at Los Alamos, it's clear that my initial excitement and sense of patriotic duty were the driving forces that sustained me through the challenges of the Manhattan Project. They were a beacon of motivation, guiding me through the ethical and moral quandaries that would later emerge. At the time, however, I was a physicist on the cusp of discovery, fueled by the desire to serve my country and the scientific community in our hour of greatest need. Arriving at Los Alamos was like stepping into a world apart, a hidden enclave carved out of the New Mexico desert, shrouded in secrecy and buzzing with the energy of a clandestine mission. The atmosphere of Los Alamos was charged with a palpable sense of urgency and purpose. The secrecy that enveloped the project was evident in every aspect of life in the town. Conversations were careful, letters home were censored, and even within the project, knowledge was compartmentalized, ensuring that only those who needed to know were privy to the full scope of our work. This veil of secrecy created a bubble around Los Alamos, a world within a world where the stakes of our endeavor were understood by all, yet spoken of in hushed tones. Despite the weight of our mission, the town itself was alive with activity and a sense of community. Scientists, engineers, and their families adapted to the unique challenges of life in a secret city. Housing was makeshift, often cramped, but there was a camaraderie that stemmed from our shared purpose. We were a diverse group, drawn from the far corners of the country and beyond, each bringing our own expertise and background to the project. This diversity fostered a melting pot of ideas, a dynamic intellectual environment where discussions ranged freely among quantum mechanics, the latest advances in experimental physics, and the technical challenges of our work. The lab facilities, while austere, buzzed with the kind of raw energy that only comes from pushing the boundaries of what is known. The pace of work was relentless, with experiments running around the clock. The urgency of our mission drove us, knowing that each breakthrough, no matter how small, brought us closer to our goal. It was an environment where coffee was consumed in copious amounts, where days melded into nights, and where the thrill of discovery was frequently punctuated by the frustration of dead ends. Yet, it was not all work. The isolation of Los Alamos fostered a unique social environment. Picnics, movie nights, and dances provided necessary relief from the intensity of our work. These moments of levity were crucial, reminding us of the normalcy we all yearned for, a world beyond the confines of our secret city. They reinforced the bonds between us, creating a sense of family among the residents of Los Alamos. In this secretive, bustling atmosphere of Los Alamos, we were acutely aware of the paradox at the heart of our mission. We were at the cutting edge of science, exploring uncharted territories of physics, yet our ultimate goal was the creation of a weapon of unimaginable destructive power. This duality was the backdrop against which we lived and worked, driving us forward with the hope that our efforts would ultimately lead to a lasting peace. In the heart of Los Alamos, amidst the secrecy and the unyielding pursuit of our monumental task, there emerged figures who not only led our efforts, but also embodied the spirit and the paradoxes of the Manhattan Project. Among these, J. Robert Oppenheimer stood as a figure of almost mythic stature, a man whose brilliance and complexity mirrored the very nature of the endeavor we had embarked upon. Oppenheimer, or Oppie as he was sometimes affectionately called, was more than just the scientific director of the project, he was its soul. With his deep understanding of physics and his philosophical bent, he navigated the project through scientific challenges and ethical quandaries alike. His leadership was not just in the realm of intellect, it was moral and emotional, guiding a team of the world's most brilliant minds through the moral fog that our work inevitably conjured. Then there was General Leslie Groves, a man of stark contrasts to Oppenheimer. A military engineer by training, Groves was the project's military leader, tasked with ensuring that the scientific achievements were translated into a usable weapon. His pragmatic, results-driven approach often clashed with the more theoretical inclinations of the scientists, yet it was this tension that drove the project forward, a constant reminder of the real-world implications of our work. Among the constellation of scientific talent was Enrico Fermi, the Italian physicist whose previous work on nuclear reactions had laid the groundwork for much of our understanding. Fermi was a pragmatist, a brilliant mind coupled with a hands-on approach to experimental physics that inspired all who worked with him. And then there was I, a physicist among physicists, yet one whose role in this grand endeavor was initially undefined. My journey from a passionate student of the cosmos to a member of this secret project was driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and patriotic duty. In Los Alamos, I found myself not just a participant in the project, but an intermediary of sorts bridging the gap between the theoretical underpinnings of our work and the practical challenges of weaponization. My role evolved with the project, from early contributions to the theoretical framework, to later involvement in the practical challenges of designing and testing the bomb. It was a role that required not just scientific acumen, but a measure of philosophical and ethical flexibility, navigating the shifting sands of a project that was as much about moral choices as it was about scientific discovery. In this unique setting, surrounded by minds like Oppenheimer, Fermi, and others, I found my own place within the project. It was a role that did not come with easy answers or clear guidelines, but required a constant balancing of the scientific drive for knowledge with the heavy responsibility of our ultimate goal. Here, in the shadow of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, we were not just building a weapon, we were shaping the future, and my part in it, though small in the grand scheme, was a testament to the complex interplay of science, morality, and human ambition that defined the Manhattan Project. As the weeks turned into months at Los Alamos, the initial thrill of scientific discovery and the camaraderie of shared purpose began to be overshadowed by a growing unease that settled deep within me. It wasn't a sudden realization but a gradual awakening, a sense of disquiet that crept into my thoughts during the long, sleepless nights and the moments of solitude amidst a desert silence. My role in the project, once a source of pride, began to weigh heavily on me. The theoretical challenges and the experimental breakthroughs, which were once purely intellectual pursuits, now carried the undeniable burden of their potential consequences. I found myself wrestling with questions that went far beyond the realm of physics. What did it mean to contribute to the creation of a weapon of unparalleled destructive power? Could the pursuit of scientific knowledge justify the devastation we were preparing to unleash? These questions became more pressing as I observed the relentless pace of our work, the single-minded focus on achieving our goal. The discussions I had with my colleagues, once lively debates on theoretical physics, now sometimes veered into the ethical implications of our work. It was clear I wasn't the only one grappling with these concerns, yet the project marched on, driven by the exigencies of war and the belief that our work was necessary to end it. My ethical concerns were compounded by the onset of haunting premonitions. Perhaps they were born out of the stress and the weight of our task, or maybe they were a manifestation of my deep-seated fears about the bomb's potential for destruction. These visions were vivid and disturbing, often coming to me in the quiet moments before sleep claimed me. I would see cities engulfed in fire, landscapes obliterated, and countless innocent lives lost in an instant. These were not the abstract calculations of yield and radius, they were visceral, heart-wrenching images of suffering and devastation. The first of these premonitions was so vivid that it left me shaken, questioning more than ever the path we were on. I saw a city, not unlike the ones I had read about in history books, reduced to ruins in the blink of an eye. The image of a child's toy, charred and twisted among the rubble, haunted me, a poignant symbol of the innocence that would be lost. This vision stayed with me, a dark cloud looming over my work, making it increasingly difficult to separate the scientific challenges from the moral implications of our endeavor. As these premonitions became more frequent, I struggled to find solace in the justifications we had been given for the project. Yes, we were at war, and yes, our work could potentially bring about a swift end to the conflict, saving countless lives in the process. But at what cost? The haunting images that visited me at night were a stark reminder of the human toll our work could exact. Conversations with my colleagues offered little relief. While some shared my concerns, the prevailing sentiment was that we must trust in the judgment of those leading the project, that the decision to use the weapon we were creating would not be made lightly. But as the project neared its culmination, and the prospect of using the bomb became increasingly real, I found myself caught in a moral quandary from which there seemed no escape. The weight of these ethical concerns and haunting premonitions marked a turning point for me. No longer could I view my work on the Manhattan Project through the lens of scientific curiosity and patriotic duty alone. The potential for destruction, the lives that could be lost, and the shadow of a future marred by our actions became ever-present thoughts, challenging the very foundations of my involvement in the project. One evening, as the desert sky turned a deep shade of indigo and the stars began their silent vigil, a specific premonition struck me with such intensity that it forever altered the course of my thoughts about our work. Exhausted from a day of relentless calculations and experiments, I had hoped for the sweet escape of sleep. Instead, I found myself trapped in a waking nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my days. In this vision, I stood overlooking a city not unlike those I had seen in my travels before the war, a bustling metropolis full of life, its streets humming with the day-to-day affairs of its inhabitants. The firestorm consumed everything in its path, buildings that had stood for centuries were reduced to ashen moments, and the screams of the people, men, women, and children caught in the unspeakable horror echoed in my ears, a chilling symphony of human despair. The air was thick with smoke, and the sky turned a sickening shade of orange, reflecting the vast devastation below. As the flames raged, I saw the aftermath of the explosion with a clarity that was almost prophetic. The once vibrant city was now a desolate wasteland, its streets silent, except for the crackling of fires that continued to consume what little remained. The few survivors wandered amidst the ruins, their faces etched with shock and grief, their eyes reflecting a loss so profound it was as if their very souls had been seared by the flames. Among the rubble, I noticed a small, charred toy, a reminder of the innocent lives shattered by this catastrophe. This image, a poignant symbol of the indiscriminate cruelty of our creation, pierced my heart. It was a vivid manifestation of my deepest fears about the bomb we were building, a stark warning of the potential future we were crafting with our own hands. This premonition shook me to my core, leaving me gasping for air as I jolted awake. The images burned into my memory. The stark reality of what we were on the brink of unleashing upon the world was laid bare before me, not in the abstract terms of physics and mathematics, but as a visceral, heart-wrenching catastrophe that could annihilate countless lives and alter the course of history. In the days that followed, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on my work. The premonition of the city in flames haunted my every moment, a constant gnawing reminder of the moral precipice on which we stood. It became a turning point in my journey, a moment that forced me to confront the profound ethical dilemmas of our endeavor and to question the very essence of our mission at Los Alamos. As the Manhattan Project advanced towards its inevitable conclusion, a growing unease began to permeate the once united front of scientists and engineers working within the confines of Los Alamos. This unease was not just about the technical challenges we faced, but about the profound moral implications of our work. A divide emerged among us, a schism that reflected the broader ethical dilemma that the prospect of unleashing atomic power upon the world represented. In the beginning, our shared purpose and the urgency of the war effort had fostered a strong sense of camaraderie and mutual purpose. We were a diverse group, brought together from across the globe by our expertise and a common goal. However, as the reality of what we were creating became increasingly apparent, spirited debates and discussions began to take a different tone. The first cracks appeared subtly. Quiet conversations over shared meals or during long nights in the lab turned towards the ethics of our project. Was the use of the bomb justified, regardless of its potential to end the war? Could we, as scientists, wash our hands of the responsibility for how our invention would be used? These were not easy questions, and answers were even harder to come by. I remember one particularly heated discussion that took place in the makeshift cafeteria. A group of physicists, myself included, found ourselves embroiled in a debate that moved quickly from the theoretical to the deeply personal. One colleague, a theoretical physicist who had lost family in the bombings of London, argued passionately that our work was necessary to prevent further loss of innocent life. Another, a young engineer fresh from his doctoral studies, countered that unleashing such a weapon would set a dangerous precedent, forever blurring the lines between civilian and military targets. This divide deepened as we neared the project's completion. Some began to question not just the morality of using the bomb, but the very nature of our participation in its creation. Letters circulated among the scientists, some arguing for a demonstration of the bomb's power to the enemy as a warning, others advocating for its use as intended to bring a swift end to the war. The unity that had once defined our mission was fracturing under the weight of these ethical considerations. Meetings that had once been purely scientific in nature began to take on a somber tone, as discussions of yield and detonation mechanisms were interspersed with debates about the potential human cost. Oppenheimer himself seemed increasingly burdened by the gravity of our work, his once vibrant demeanor shadowed by the looming decision. As the project approached its culmination, the divide among us grew more pronounced. A petition made its way through the ranks of the scientists, pleading for reconsideration of the bomb's use against civilian targets. Not all signed, but the very existence of the petition was a testament to the deep moral conflict that had taken root within our ranks. This growing divide reflected a broader struggle with the ethical implications of our work, a struggle that went beyond the confines of Los Alamos and into the heart of what it means to wield scientific knowledge. We were no longer merely scientists and engineers, we had become unwitting participants in a moral dilemma that would define the modern age. The unity that had propelled us forward was now a mosaic of conflicting emotions and ethical stances, each of us wrestling with the implications of our work and the shadow it cast over the future. As the project neared its critical phase, the internal conflict that had been simmering within me began to boil over, manifesting in ways I could neither ignore nor fully understand. The ethical dilemmas of our work, once abstract discussions, had taken root deep within my psyche, coloring every aspect of my life in Los Alamos. The visions of destruction that haunted my dreams were a stark reminder of the potential consequences of our endeavor, leading to sleepless nights filled with turmoil and doubt. My restlessness was more than physical, it was a deep existential unease that pervaded my very being. Night after night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my Spartan quarters, the silence of the desert night amplifying the cacophony of my thoughts. The vivid premonition of a city in flames replayed in my mind, a relentless reminder of what might come to pass if our project succeeded. These visions were no longer just nightmares, they felt like portents of a future we were hurtling towards with frightening speed. This growing unrest within me began to affect my relationships with my colleagues. Where once there was easy camaraderie and shared excitement over our scientific pursuits, there was now an undercurrent of tension. Conversations became strained, especially with those who seemed untroubled by the ethical implications of our work. I found myself increasingly isolated, retreating into my own thoughts and doubts, unable to share the depth of my turmoil for fear of further alienation. My isolation was not just social, it was intellectual and emotional as well. I began to question not only the morality of our project, but my own reasons for joining it. The patriotic fervor and scientific curiosity that had once driven me now seemed naive, overshadowed by the grim reality of what we were about to unleash upon the world. This internal conflict made it difficult to engage with my work. Tasks that I had once performed with enthusiasm now felt Sisyphean, each calculation a step closer to an outcome I feared. Even my interactions with friends outside the project were affected. Phone calls with family and letters to old colleagues were filled with evasions and half-truths, the secrecy of our work a barrier that I could not cross. But it was more than just the secrets I was obliged to keep, it was the secrets I kept from myself, the growing realization that I was part of something that might fundamentally alter the course of human history in ways I was beginning to fear. This period of my life was marked by a profound sense of disconnection from my peers, from my work, and from the person I thought I was. The excitement and pride in our scientific achievements were now tinged with dread and guilt, a duality that I struggled to reconcile. The closer we came to completing the bomb, the more I found myself grappling with questions of responsibility and the ethical use of our scientific knowledge. These questions, once academic, had become intensely personal, a reflection of the internal conflict that threatened to consume me. In the quiet moments of the night, when the world seemed to pause, I found myself confronting a stark choice. Continue my work, contributing to a project that could end millions of lives, or confront the moral implications of my actions and the role I played in this historic endeavor. This internal conflict was a crucible, reshaping my understanding of myself and my place in the world. It was a struggle that would define my experience of the Manhattan Project, leaving an indelible mark on my conscience and my soul. The day the decision was made to use the atomic bomb remains etched in my memory, a moment frozen in time that marks the irrevocable crossing of a threshold. I was not present in the rooms where the fate of countless lives was debated and ultimately sealed. No, my role in those discussions was as an absent participant, my contributions laid out in equations and experimental results, not in the arguments for or against the use of the weapon we had created. Yet, despite my physical removal from the decision-making process, the weight of complicity settled heavily on my shoulders, a mantle of responsibility I could not shrug off. In the immediate aftermath of the announcement, a surreal sense of detachment overcame me. I watched as my colleagues reacted to the news with a mixture of relief, trepidation, and, in some cases, unguarded jubilation at the thought of our project achieving its ultimate purpose. For many, the decision was a validation of the years of toil and sacrifice, a necessary step toward ending the global conflict that had claimed so many lives. Yet, for me, the news brought no comfort, only a deepening of the internal conflict that had been my constant companion in the recent months. The feeling of complicity was not rational, perhaps. I had not made the decision, I had not weighed the strategic considerations or the estimates of civilian casualties. My role had been that of a scientist, solving problems of physics and engineering, not those of morality and ethics. And yet, I could not escape the sense that my work had directly contributed to this moment, that my hands, though far removed from the actual mechanisms of the bomb, were nonetheless stained by the decision to use it. This sense of complicity was a heavy burden, one that led to sleepless nights filled with questions to which I had no answers. How could I reconcile my love of science, my belief in the pursuit of knowledge, with the creation of a weapon of mass destruction? Was there a line that we had crossed, or was it inevitable that scientific progress would lead us to this point? And most hauntingly, how would history judge us, those who had built the bomb? Would we be seen as liberators, as architects of peace, or as something far darker? The decision to use the atomic bomb marked a turning point, not just in the war, but in the very nature of human conflict. For me, it also marked a turning point in my understanding of my own role in the world. I was a scientist, yes, but I was also a citizen of a world that was forever changed by our creation. The dichotomy of my identity as a scientist passionate about discovery and as an individual grappling with the ethical implications of those discoveries became more pronounced, a rift that I struggled to bridge in the days and weeks that followed the announcement. In the end, the feeling of complicity in the decision to use the atomic bomb was a reflection of a broader struggle with the implications of our work. It was a struggle that went beyond questions of ethics and morality, touching on the very essence of what it means to be human, to wield power, and to confront the consequences of our own ingenuity. The days following the announcement of the decision to use the atomic bomb were marked by a profound internal struggle, a grappling with the stark realization of my indirect yet undeniable role in what was to come. This period was characterized by a tumult of emotions and thoughts that seemed to run in endless circles, seeking answers to questions that, perhaps, had no answers at all. As the reality of our project's culmination began to set in, I found myself wrestling with a complex mix of feelings: pride in the scientific achievement we had accomplished, overshadowed by a growing sense of dread about the consequences of our work. The bomb, once an abstract challenge in physics and engineering, had become a very real instrument of war, poised to unleash destruction on an unprecedented scale. The knowledge that my efforts had contributed to its creation weighed heavily on me, casting a shadow over the sense of accomplishment that had once filled me with pride. The moral and ethical dimensions of our work, which I had managed to keep at bay through the long months of labor at Los Alamos, now demanded my full attention. I could no longer view myself simply as a scientist caught up in the pursuit of knowledge. Instead, I was forced to confront the fact that the work I had been a part of had far-reaching implications beyond the realms of science and war. We had unleashed a force that had the power to reshape not just the landscape of conflict, but the very fabric of human society. This realization brought with it a sense of isolation, a feeling of being disconnected from the world outside the confines of the project. My conversations with colleagues, once filled with technical discussions and shared aspirations, now seemed distant and hollow. I found it increasingly difficult to articulate my growing apprehensions, to voice the internal conflict that gnawed at me. It was as if I was living in two worlds, one defined by the clear-cut principles of science, and the other mired in the murky waters of ethical ambiguity. The weight of my indirect role in the forthcoming use of the atomic bomb manifested in sleepless nights, filled with a restless anxiety about the future. I would lie awake, staring into the darkness, haunted by visions of the devastation we were about to unleash. These were not the detached calculations of blast radiation and thermal effects, but visceral images of human suffering and loss. The enormity of what was about to happen, facilitated in part by my own contributions, became a heavy burden, a source of deep personal anguish. I grappled with feelings of guilt and responsibility, questioning whether I had done enough to voice my concerns, whether there was anything more I could have done to alter the course we were on. The rational part of me understood that the decision to use the bomb was driven by considerations far beyond my control, determined by leaders and strategists grappling with the harsh realities of war. Yet, the knowledge did little to ease the sense of complicity that enveloped me. As the day of the bomb's use approached, I found myself caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions: fear of the impending destruction, sorrow for the lives that would be lost or forever changed, and a profound sense of grief for the innocence that was about to be shattered. This internal struggle was a solitary journey, a path I walked alone, even as I was surrounded by those who had shared in the work that had brought us to this precipice. In the end, my grappling with the realization of my indirect role in what was to come was a deeply personal reckoning with the consequences of human ingenuity and the moral responsibilities that accompany our scientific endeavors. It was a journey that forced me to confront the paradox of progress, the understanding that every leap forward carries with it the potential for both creation and destruction, and the recognition that with knowledge comes the burden of choice. On that fateful day, when the news reached us that the bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, the world as I knew it irrevocably changed. The air in Los Alamos, usually buzzing with activity and conversation, seemed to stand still, heavy with an unspoken realization of the magnitude of what had transpired. The theoretical had become terrifyingly real, and the weight of our collective endeavor crashed down upon me with a force that was overwhelming. I heard the news from a colleague, his voice a mixture of awe and trepidation, the words hitting me like a physical blow. "It's been done," he said, "Hiroshima has been bombed." In that moment, the images that had haunted my dreams, the premonitions of destruction and suffering, merged with the stark reality of the atomic age being born in violence and devastation. The abstract numbers and calculations that had occupied my thoughts for so long now had a concrete, horrifying significance. The initial shock gave way to a flood of guilt and despair. The guilt was all-encompassing, a deep, gnawing sense that I had played a part in a tragedy of unimaginable scale. Despite my previous struggles with the ethical implications of our work, nothing could have prepared me for the reality of the bomb's use. The images broadcasted in the aftermath, showing a city obliterated, its people decimated, brought home the true cost of our scientific achievement. The suffering etched into the faces of the survivors, the stories of lives shattered in an instant, echoed the very premonitions that had tormented me, now magnified into a stark, unbearable reality. Despair followed guilt, a feeling of profound sorrow for the loss of life and the innocence that had been extinguished. I questioned the path that had led us here, the decisions made in the name of ending the war, and the role I had played in it all. The justification that our work had been necessary to bring about peace seemed hollow, a feeble attempt to mask the enormity of the destruction we had unleashed. In the days that followed, I found myself in a state of near paralysis, the routines of daily life at Los Alamos continuing around me, but feeling utterly disconnected from them. My work, once a source of pride and purpose, now felt like a monument to human folly, a testament to our capacity for destruction. The camaraderie that had sustained us through the long months of the project seemed irrelevant, the celebrations of some of my colleagues alien and distasteful. The news from Hiroshima cast a long shadow over my thoughts, a constant reminder of the irrevocable harm that science, in the wrong hands or used in the wrong way, could inflict. I grappled with the knowledge that the world had entered a new era, one in which the power to annihilate entire cities, to end countless lives in a matter of seconds, was now a reality. This was the legacy of the Manhattan Project, a legacy that I, in some small way, had helped to create. As the full extent of the devastation in Hiroshima became clear, I struggled to find a way forward, to reconcile my love of science with the horror of its application. The bombs dropping on Hiroshima was not just a historical milestone, it was a personal turning point, a moment that forced me to confront the deepest questions about responsibility, ethics, and the true cost of our advancements. I saw in my mind's eye the once bustling city of Hiroshima, a place vibrant with life, now reduced to a desolate wasteland. The bomb's unimaginable heat and force had obliterated buildings, homes, and landmarks, leaving nothing but shadows and ashes in its wake. These shadows, imprints of lives extinguished in an instant, were a chilling testament to the bomb's devastating power. They haunted me, a silent reminder of the countless innocent lives that were lost. The suffering of the survivors was palpable in my visions. I imagined people wandering through the ruins, their faces etched with pain and confusion, searching for loved ones among the rubble. I saw the injured, their bodies bearing the indelible marks of the bomb's radiation, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. The images of children, particularly, tore at me, a poignant symbol of the future that had been stolen from them in an instant. These visions were not merely abstract thoughts, they were deeply felt, emotional responses to the news of Hiroshima. The descriptions I heard and read about in the aftermath of the bombing only served to confirm and amplify the scenes that played out in my mind. The reality of the atomic bomb's impact was even more horrific than I had feared, aligning eerily with the premonitions that had haunted me. The empathy I felt for the victims was overwhelming, a profound sense of solidarity with those who suffered because of a weapon I had helped to create. This empathy was mingled with guilt, a guilt that stemmed not just from my role in the Manhattan Project, but from my prior inability to fully grasp the moral implications of our work. I had feared the consequences, yes, but the stark reality of Hiroshima brought a new depth to my understanding of what we had unleashed upon the world. As I grappled with these visions, the boundary between my premonitions and the actual events in Hiroshima blurred. The imagined destruction and suffering that I had once hoped to avoid were now indelibly part of our shared history, a dark chapter in the story of humanity's relationship with the power it wields. This alignment of my fears with reality served as a painful confirmation of the warnings my conscience had been trying to communicate, underscoring the profound responsibility that comes with the pursuit of knowledge and the application of scientific discovery. The news of the bombing of Hiroshima had barely begun to settle, a raw wound in the fabric of our collective consciousness, when word came of an unthinkable decision. Another bomb was to be dropped, this time on Nagasaki. The announcement hit me with a sense of déjà vu, a recurring nightmare that I was powerless to wake from. Despite the overwhelming devastation already wrought, the machinery of war churned on, indifferent to the pleas of conscience and humanity. In those moments, the feeling of powerlessness enveloped me completely. The decision to bomb Nagasaki seemed to confirm the worst of my fears, that the unleashing of atomic power would not be a singular horror, but the beginning of a pattern, a precedent that could lead to untold suffering. The images of Hiroshima's destruction, still fresh in my mind, now mingled with a preemptive mourning for Nagasaki, a city about to face the same fate, its people unaware of the impending doom. My thoughts turned frantic, searching for some way to halt the course of events, to scream a warning across the void that would somehow prevent the second bombing. But the reality was stark and immutable. I was but a cog in a vast machine, my objections a mere whisper against the roar of war. The decision was made far above my station, by individuals who weighed the scales of strategy over the sanctity of human life. The sense of helplessness was profound. I had joined the Manhattan Project out of a sense of duty, motivated by the belief that our work was necessary to end the war and save lives. Yet, standing on the brink of Nagasaki's destruction, those justifications rang hollow. The ethical dilemmas I had wrestled with, the premonitions of disaster that had haunted me, all seemed to coalesce into a single inescapable truth. I was complicit in a tragedy that was unfolding in real time, a tragedy that I had no power to stop. In the sleepless nights that followed, my mind raced with questions that offered no comfort. Had we, as scientists, done enough to convey the moral implications of our work? Was there any action I could have taken, any argument I could have made, that might have altered the course of events? The harsh answer that echoed back was a testament to the limitations of individual agency in the face of systemic momentum. The project had taken on a life of its own, beyond the reach of any one person's ability to control or redirect. As the day of the bombing approached, a sense of impending doom settled over me. It was as if I was watching a disaster unfold in slow motion, fully aware of the horror that was to come but utterly frozen, unable to alter its path. This feeling of powerlessness was not just about the inability to prevent the bombing, it was a deeper realization about the limits of our control over the forces we unleash, a humbling and terrifying acknowledgement of the Pandora's box we had opened with the atomic bomb. The bombing of Nagasaki would proceed, despite the devastation in Hiroshima, despite the doubts and moral quandaries that plagued me and others who understood the implications. In this moment, I was forced to confront the darkest aspects of our endeavor, the shadow side of scientific achievement, and the sobering truth that, once set in motion, some actions cannot be undone. This realization was a burden I would carry long after the war's end, a somber reflection on the power we wield and the responsibility that comes with it. In the aftermath of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the scope of the devastation wrought by the atomic bombs began to unfold in a harrowing cascade of reports, personal accounts, and the haunting images that filled the pages of newspapers and the reels of newsreels. As these details permeated the public consciousness, they also infiltrated my thoughts, painting a vivid, distressing picture of the immediate and long-term effects on the Japanese cities and their people. This information, coupled with the vividness of my own imagination and the guilt that gnawed at me, created a tableau of destruction and suffering that was almost unbearable in its intensity. The immediate aftermath of the bombings was characterized by an unfathomable level of destruction. Entire neighborhoods in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been obliterated, reduced to smoldering ruins. Landmarks that had stood for centuries were now indistinguishable rubble. The fires that raged in the wake of the explosions had incinerated everything in their path, leaving survivors to wander through a landscape that was unrecognizable from the cities they had known just moments before. But it was the human toll of the bombings that haunted me most deeply. The initial blasts had killed tens of thousands instantly, their lives extinguished in a flash of heat and force beyond comprehension. Yet, in the days and weeks that followed, it became clear that the agony of the bombings was far from over. Survivors, many grievously injured, faced a hellish landscape of medical and humanitarian crises. Hospitals, those that remained, were overwhelmed, struggling to provide care amidst the ruins. Burn victims, suffering from injuries unlike any seen before, were in desperate need of treatment that was often beyond the capabilities of the remaining medical facilities. The news reports and first-hand accounts spoke of the shadows burned into walls and pavement, haunting reminders of the people who had stood there at the moment of the blasts. These images became a symbol of the atomic bombing's horror, a macabre testament to the power of the weapons we had unleashed. As the weeks turned into months, the long-term effects of the bombings began to emerge. Radiation sickness, a cruel aftermath of the explosions, claimed more lives, adding to the toll of the bombings. The survivors, known as hibakusha, faced not only the physical scars of their ordeal, but the psychological trauma of having lived through such unimaginable destruction. Their suffering was compounded by the stigma that some faced, the unfounded fears of radiation poisoning that ostracized them from parts of society. In my own mind, the scenes of devastation and suffering were relentless, a constant vivid backdrop that accompanied my every thought. I imagined the once vibrant cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as they struggled to rebuild from the ashes, their landscapes forever altered, their histories irrevocably bifurcated by the bombings. The resilience of the survivors was as astonishing as the destruction had been complete, their efforts to rebuild their lives a testament to the human spirit's endurance. Yet, the knowledge that their suffering was a direct consequence of the project to which I had devoted years of my life was a source of deep, unrelenting pain. The vividness of my imagination, once a tool for scientific inquiry and exploration, now served as a conduit for empathy and guilt, bringing the distant consequences of our actions into stark, unavoidable focus. The stories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, relayed through news and personal accounts, were not just abstract events in a far-off land, they were indelibly etched into my conscience, a haunting reminder of the price of our scientific triumph. As the world began the slow process of rebuilding from the wreckage of war, I was left to grapple with the stark reality of what our creation had wrought. The atomic bomb, a product of our scientific ingenuity and collective labor, had unleashed devastation of an unprecedented scale, marking the dawn of a new era where humanity possessed the means to annihilate itself. This realization was a heavy burden, one that challenged the very foundations of my understanding of science and its role in society. My struggle with the moral implications of my work was compounded by the knowledge of the suffering inflicted on the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The images of destruction, the stories of survivors, and the haunting legacy of radiation sickness served as constant reminders of the human cost of our scientific achievements. These were not abstract figures or hypothetical scenarios, they were the lived realities of thousands of individuals whose lives had been irrevocably altered by the force we had unleashed. In the solitude of my thoughts, I wrestled with questions for which there were no easy answers. Could the ends ever truly justify the means, especially when those means carried such catastrophic potential? Had we, in our pursuit of ending the war, crossed an ethical boundary that should have remained inviolable? And what responsibility did I bear, as one of the many hands that had helped to craft this weapon? These questions haunted my waking moments and infiltrated my dreams, a relentless tide of doubt that eroded the once firm ground of my convictions. The joy of scientific discovery, which had once been my guiding light, was now overshadowed by the somber understanding of the power science had to both create and destroy. As the world celebrated peace, I found myself in a state of internal conflict, a solitary journey through a landscape of moral ambiguity. The war had ended, but for me, the battle with the implications of my work was just beginning. It was a struggle that would define my post-war life, a quest for redemption and understanding in the face of a world forever changed by the atomic bomb. This journey was not just about coming to terms with the past, it was about shaping a future in which the lessons of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would not be forgotten, a future in which the awesome power of science would be wielded with wisdom and restraint. In the quiet aftermath of the war's end, as the world began to take stock of the profound changes wrought by years of conflict and the decisive, terrifying conclusion brought about by the atomic bombings, I found myself mired in a deep and unsettling introspection. The questions that haunted me were not just of a scientific nature, but profoundly moral and existential. At the heart of my turmoil was a relentless questioning of the necessity of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the terrible price of the peace they had ostensibly secured. The jubilant headlines proclaiming the end of the war could not drown out the echoing doubts in my mind. Was there truly no alternative? Could the same outcome have been achieved through other means, sparing the lives of tens of thousands of civilians? These questions became a chorus, a constant background to my thoughts, challenging the narrative that had been constructed around our work and its consequences. I pondered the decision-making process that had led to the bombings, the weighing of lives in a grim calculus of war. The strategic justifications, the arguments about saving more lives in the long run by avoiding a ground invasion, did little to assuage my doubts. The more I learned about the discussions that had taken place at the highest levels, the more I wondered about the paths not taken, the diplomatic options not fully explored, the ceasefires that might have been negotiated. The price of peace, as it had been achieved, seemed staggeringly high. The immediate loss of life, the lingering deaths from radiation sickness, the generations marked by the aftereffects of the bombs, these were not abstract costs. They were measured in human suffering, in families torn apart, in communities destroyed. The ethical dimensions of our decision to use the atomic bomb, once obscured by the urgency of war, now demanded my full attention in the stark light of peace. This questioning was not an academic exercise, it was a deeply personal reckoning with my own role in the events. As one of the many scientists who had contributed to the development of the atomic bomb, I could not absolve myself of responsibility by hiding behind the veil of collective action or the imperatives of war. The knowledge that my work had been instrumental in causing such profound suffering weighed heavily on me, a burden that was both a source of guilt and a catalyst for reflection. The peace that had been won was shadowed by the specter of future conflicts, now made all the more terrifying by the demonstration of nuclear might. The bombings had not only ended a war, they had ushered in the atomic age, a time of unprecedented peril, where the very survival of humanity seemed contingent on the restraint of the nations that wielded this power. This realization only deepened my sense of unease, the awareness that the peace we celebrated was fragile, its foundation built on a weapon of unimaginable destructive potential. In grappling with these questions, I sought not just to come to terms with the past, but to understand the implications for the future. The necessity of the bombings, the price of peace, these were not just historical curiosities, but urgent issues that bore directly on the ethical use of scientific discoveries. As I struggled with these questions, I hoped to find a path toward a future in which the lessons of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would guide our actions, a future in which the horrors of atomic warfare would never be repeated. In the shadow of the war's end and the haunting legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I found myself at a crossroads. The relief of peace was tempered by the burden of guilt and the weight of unanswered questions about the moral implications of my work on the Manhattan Project. It was in this period of profound introspection that I made a pivotal decision. To dedicate my post-war life to advocating for nuclear disarmament and addressing the ethical dilemmas posed by scientific advancements. This decision was not made lightly. It was born out of a deep sense of responsibility and need to ensure that the horrors witnessed at Hiroshima and Nagasaki would never be repeated. My journey into the world of disarmament and peace activism was fueled by the belief that science must serve humanity's best interests, not its destruction. I sought to channel my guilt and my energies into a positive force, advocating for a world where the specter of nuclear annihilation no longer loomed over us. I began by educating myself on the complexities of international politics and the burgeoning movements for nuclear disarmament. My background as a scientist gave me a unique perspective on the issue, allowing me to speak with authority about the technical aspects of nuclear weapons and their devastating potential. I engaged with fellow scientists, policymakers, and peace activists, lending my voice and my expertise to the cause. My advocacy took various forms, from writing articles and giving lectures to participating in public demonstrations and policy discussions. Each action, each word spoken or written, was a step towards atonement, an attempt to make amends for my indirect role in the bombings. I sought to raise awareness about the urgent need for disarmament, to prevent other scientists from facing the same moral quandaries I had, and to contribute to the creation of international treaties that would curb the proliferation of nuclear weapons. The road was not easy. Advocating for nuclear disarmament in the Cold War era, when the logic of deterrence and the arms race dominated global politics, often felt like an uphill battle. I faced skepticism, criticism, and at times, outright hostility from those who viewed nuclear weapons as essential to national security. Yet, these challenges only strengthened my resolve, reinforcing my belief in the importance of my mission. My efforts in the disarmament movement also served as a personal journey of grappling with my guilt. Each speech delivered, each article penned, was a step towards reconciliation with my past. I found solace in the community of like-minded individuals who shared my commitment to peace and disarmament. Their support and shared vision provided a measure of healing, a balm for the wounds that the war and its aftermath had inflicted on my conscience. As the years passed, my advocacy for nuclear disarmament became an integral part of my identity. It was a way to honor the memories of those who had suffered and died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a commitment to a future free from the threat of nuclear war. This dedication to disarmament was my legacy, a testament to the transformative power of guilt and responsibility into a lifelong mission for peace. Through this work, I hope to contribute to a world where scientific discoveries would be harnessed for the betterment of humanity, not its destruction, a world where the lessons of the past would guide our path forward. As the years have passed and my efforts in advocating for nuclear disarmament have woven themselves into the fabric of my existence, I find myself often reflecting on the journey that has brought me here. From the exhilarating rush of scientific discovery in the hidden laboratories of Los Alamos, to the solemn commitment to peace and disarmament, reflecting on the fine line between scientific discovery and ethical responsibility, I am reminded that every scientist, every researcher, walks this line. We are the custodians of knowledge that has the power to shape the future of humanity, for better or for worse. The choices we make, the paths we choose to follow, resonate far beyond the confines of our laboratories and our lifetimes. The legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the haunting images and stories of those who suffered, serve as a poignant reminder of the weight of the responsibility we bear. They compel us to ask difficult questions, to engage in the moral and ethical deliberations that must accompany our quest for knowledge. It is a reminder that scientific discovery, devoid of ethical considerations, risks becoming a Pyrrhic victory, where the cost of our advancements is measured in human lives and suffering. As I reflect on my own role in this history, on the decisions I made and the actions I took, I am confronted with the complexities of navigating the intersection of science and ethics. My post-war dedication to nuclear disarmament is, in many ways, an attempt to reconcile these complexities, to make amends for the consequences of our scientific achievements, and to advocate for a future where such dilemmas are approached with wisdom and foresight. The fine line between scientific discovery and ethical responsibility is not a boundary to be feared, but a guidepost for our journey as scientists and as human beings. It challenges us to consider the broader implications of our work, to engage with the ethical questions that accompany our quest for understanding. It is a call to action, urging us to harness the power of science, not just for the advancement of knowledge, but for the betterment of humanity, ensuring that the lessons of the past inform the choices we make for the future. In this reflection, I find not just a sense of responsibility, but a source of hope. The dialogue between science and ethics, between discovery and responsibility, is an opportunity for growth, for a deeper understanding of our place in the world and the impact we can have. It is a testament to the capacity of the human spirit to learn from its history, to strive for a future where the marvels of scientific discovery are matched by our commitment to ethical responsibility and the common good. As I sit quietly in the twilight of my years, the cacophony of the world outside seems distant, almost like a faint echo from another life. The journey from the secret confines of Los Alamos to the forefront of nuclear disarmament advocacy has been long and fraught with introspection, marked by moments of profound realization and deep, sometimes painful, reflection. In the stillness, I am compelled to look back, to trace the arc of a life intertwined with one of the most pivotal periods in human history. The atomic bomb, and the shadow it cast over the 20th century, remains a defining aspect of my legacy. Yet, as I ponder the path I have walked, I am struck not by the weight of what was done, but by the potential of what might be. The world has changed immeasurably since the days of the Manhattan Project, since the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki reshaped our collective understanding of war and peace, of science and ethics. In my advocacy for nuclear disarmament, I found not just a purpose, but a calling, a way to bridge the chasm between the destructive capabilities of scientific discovery and the moral imperatives that guide our use of such discoveries. This work, though often challenging and marked by setbacks, has been a source of hope, a testament to the belief that change is possible, that the future is not irrevocably bound by the decisions of the past. As I reflect on these years, I am heartened by the progress that has been made, by the treaties signed and the weapons dismantled, by the growing global consensus on the need for a world free of nuclear arms. Yet, I am also acutely aware of the challenges that remain, of the tensions that simmer and the arsenals that still exist. The threat of nuclear war, though diminished, has not been eradicated, and the work of disarmament, of ensuring that no other city suffers the fate of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, is far from complete. This realization, far from disheartening, is a clarion call to future generations, to those who will inherit this complex legacy of scientific achievement and ethical responsibility. The journey towards a more peaceful, secure world is a collective one, requiring the engagement and commitment of individuals from all walks of life, from scientists and policymakers to activists and citizens. In the quiet of my reflection, I am reminded that the true measure of our humanity lies not in the might of our weapons, but in the strength of our convictions, in our capacity for empathy, for understanding, and for action. As I pass the torch to those who will come after me, I am buoyed by the belief that the lessons of the past will light the way forward, guiding us towards a future where the specter of nuclear annihilation is but a distant memory, and the promise of peace is a reality for all. This epilogue, then, is not just a conclusion to my story, but an invitation to continue the work that remains unfinished.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.